our Congress. Where are we? We're now bankrupt. This nation is bankrupt, and I'll tell you something. One of the biggest fears, everyone listening to your show, and there should be a hell of a lot more people listening to you, believe me, buddy, but one of the greatest fears they should have is they'll wake up some morning and read the headlines, or they'll see that ticker on the television, and the dollar has collapsed completely. We're belly up in this country, Michael. Forget this 10% unemployment. It's about 20. Also, forget this coming out of a recession. Truth of the matter is, you take Medicare and Social Security dollars out of this economy, and it makes 1929 look like a fender bender. We're in a depression. We're in a serious problem, and they're dealing and tinkering with symptoms, Michael. The problem is the progressive income tax and that Federal Reserve System. We don't even coin our own money, control our own money. And second of all, we reward dependency, subsidize illegitimacy with a communist progressive income tax. Now, it's very simple, Michael. Until they move to a consumption tax, and I recommend it to be a final retail sales of 25%, which includes total funding for Medicare and Social Security, there's no more withholding, no more debt taxes, no more capital gains tax, no more IRS. You repeal the 16th Amendment. And one thing is very important, Michael. It puts that 25% tax right on the border. Now, just briefly, Harvard did a study on it. Back then it was the Tozan trafficking bill, and we left Social Security and Medicare out. I am now talking about bringing Medicare and Social Security in and graduating at 25%. Harvard said when you get rid of that tax code, which is so oppressive, that's chased companies out of America, they said that the prices will hardly rise from what they are now with that 25% tax. And let me tell you what, now, no capital gains tax, no tax on investment, no tax on savings, no debt tax. This is where we got to go, Michael. Everybody's talking about the symptoms. No one's dealing with the cancer. The cancer is that progressive communist income tax. Damn it, it's got to go. And second of all, there should be nobody but the American people that controls the American government. If it happens to be Israel through their lobby, then go ahead and call me what you want. Damn it, that's the way it is.
Well, Jim, you just pointed out something very, very interesting here, and I think we need to drive this fact home that the truth is that the entire time you were in Congress, you were talking about a lot of issues that no one else would touch. Everybody else was running to support NAFTA and GATT and free trade. Everybody was, pushing for all these programs. You were the only one who was out there saying loudly and proudly that we needed to protect our borders, that we needed to protect American jobs and industry, that we needed to look out for America first. And that apparently they consider a very dangerous thing. All right, well, I hear we are going to the break, folks. When we come back, more with Jim Traficant, and we do have some callers lined up, and I'll ask you to keep your questions brief and let Jim say what he has to say. Stay tuned, folks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We have Jim Traficant here with us tonight. Back in the 1930s and 1940s, the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives had a lot of people of great integrity, real towers of integrity, people who were not afraid to speak out. And as far as I'm concerned, during the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, there was only one member of Congress who could even stand next to any of those great people of the past, and that's Jim Traficant. Jim, I want to ask you a question. It's a personal question. You were back when you were in college. You were playing football up there at the University of Pittsburgh. Did you ever even have an inkling in your mind that you would ever be serving in the U.S. Congress, or that you would end up going to jail for just speaking your mind?
Well, certainly not. I was raised very, very poor neighborhood. In fact, we had a rough time. My dad was a truck driver, and things were tough when I was a kid. But we were a good family, and we survived. And through my athletic ability, a full scholarship, I was recruited all over the country. In fact, was all set to go to Notre Dame, and ended up firing the football coach Christmas Eve. And that was a shame. I really looked forward to that, and really had my heart set on it when they fired that head coach, and he didn't take any of the new coach didn't take any of the kids that he had lined up. So, no, I never thought so. But I always felt one thing very passionately, that you in America, you have free speech, and don't be afraid to use it. When you go into deliberate in a jury room or in a ballot box, let no one influence you, and don't be afraid to stand up for your country. One thing you said that is true, and believe me when I tell you this, I made some statements about Palestinian children were godchildren too, and that there was genocide that was happening over there. And everybody would just look down. No one would say a word because everybody was afraid, Michael. They didn't want to have an opponent with $2-3 million bankroll and all the mainstream news media calling you a Nazi. And I'll never forget when I undertaken the Demina case, when the mainstream media says trafficking supports Nazi mass murder. You know, I never said anything, but when I brought him home, and it was my investigation basically freed that man. You never heard my name again because they were afraid to God I'd end up running for U.S. Senate or something. So the bottom line is they are afraid of the voice. It was a lone voice, but they were afraid of it, believe me.
You know, and that was our very, very dear mutual friend, one of the finest human beings I've ever known, the late Jerome Brentar, who I think was the first person to bring the Demina case to your attention.
Yes, he had called me a number of times, and then like I said in my column, the young John and Ed Nishnik came to the office, and my staff told him I wasn't in. And finally, you know, I listened to his comments, and he basically said, "My God, you know, I don't even have a parking ticket. No one even talked to me." I guess they went to every House and as member and every senator they possibly could, and no one would even let him in the door. Michael, what a tragedy! And when I had sat down with him, this never hit the press. I said, "Look, if your dad's responsible for exterminating 1 million people," I says, "I sure as hell will pull the switch." I said, "But I think your congressmen and your senators should at least sit down and talk to you." And they said that they didn't come to me, and they came to me last, Michael, because they knew the government hated me. They needed somebody that the government liked. And the way it turned out, it worked out good. But look what he's going through now, Michael. Look at this. God forbid. What a tragedy we're faced with.
Yeah, I'm almost glad Jerry Brentar isn't here to see this. That's yeah.
Yeah, he's an unusual guy, and he put a lot of money into that process too. Believe me, he financed a lot of that struggle that went on over there. But you know, when I went over there for that week to try and help them, I in fact paid my own way. And if it wasn't for that interview on Brian Gumbel, I'm not so sure that Israeli Supreme Court would have turned around as they did. And if you could by any chance get that tape, when I said, look, they put this man to death, Israel's going to lose $20-25 billion a year. And he said, well, they only get $3 billion, Congressman, $3 billion. I said, that's $5,000 for every man, woman, and child in Israel. I said, but the truth is, I said, Brian, I said, that's just one of the 13 bills. I said, there's loans converted to grants, economic assistance, military assistance. I said, it's more like $20 to $25 billion a year. Let me tell you something. It didn't take long to get a phone call that says, take them home, because they knew the evidence I had was overwhelming. But, Michael, the Sixth Circuit Court in Cincinnati wouldn't accept the evidence, number one. Number two, Congress wouldn't hold a hearing. Jim, please don't bring that to me. It's too sensitive. It's too sensitive. And I said it then, and I say it now. When does sensitivity waive the Bill of Rights and the Constitution? I'm ashamed of our government, Michael. I'm ashamed of it. And I'll tell you something. I don't know what I'm going to do, but the FBI, the IRS, and the Justice Department is going to answer to me before it's over. I am that determined.
Well, I know there's a lot of people out there that are behind you like they were when you were in Congress, and that's one of the reasons why they had to get you out of there. And I'll tell you what, Jim, we have quite a few people lined up here that would like to say hello, including a couple from your home state of Ohio.
Well, go right ahead.
I'd like to go to the phones right now. We have Mike in Ohio. Mike, come aboard.
How you doing?
How you doing tonight, Mike?
Oh, I'm doing fairly well, and I'm glad to see Mr. Kravick, and finally he's been let out of prison. I've been following his case, because I'm just up in Lorain County. I know what goes on. We hear about that, and I sensed straight from the beginning that he was being set up. And with the John Demjanjuk, I knew about the Israelis, the Jewish, their influence on our representatives and congressmen, and when I started hearing Mr. Traficant tell